Meat is meat, right? She grumbled across the campfire, gleaming blue eyes fixated on the slowly rotating hunk of meat. No, there's a big difference between a slab of stumper steak and, scarab meat. The giant man responded, cranking the spit to ensure even cooking. It's a miracle you haven't gotten food poisoning. My food has been poisoned before, actually? The large man shook his head slowly, pausing his diligent monitoring momentarily to remove his woolen knit cap. The others around the fire watched the two bicker about dinner, half asleep but entertained as the roaring rubble fire warmed their frozen bones. The beast, a man as wide as he was tall, his face covered in tattooed war markings of his former clan, sported a cruel curved blade on his back that had begun to be eaten away by rust. If you don't cook meat right, it makes you sick. Can kill you if you do it badly enough, he corrected with furrowed brows. Beside his squatting figure, happily slobbering on a femur bone from their hunt, was the loyal hound of the group. His matted black fur hung off his battle-hardened body. You say that, but Porkchop's never gotten sick and he only eats raw meat, she countered, whether she was correct or not, doing nothing to lessen her smug expression. Next in the circle was a man who was the inverse of the beast in every way. Small and skinny, Confidence Man scratched at his short beard before folding his arms across his chest. He gently leaned back against the rotted remains of an old-world armoire they had brutalized to feed their heat source. All those hidden freaks, I don't think they ever cook people, Confidence Man added, eyeing the slowly rotating roast. After him was a woman, resting her forearm on her bent knee and gripping the pommel of a long, incredibly well-preserved single-edged sword. She ran a sharpening stone along it. Her blackened chest plate of cobbled-together metal sat in front of her by the flames, thawing by its warmth. She cracked an unusually gentle smile at her companions, enjoying the rare comfort in the wasteland. In between strokes of the sharpening stone, she brushed her long, unruly hair out of her face. I don't think we should be taking food advice from the silent cannibals. West Engine hid the subtle curl of her lips from her fellows, attempting to maintain her carefully cultivated stoic persona. Attempting to sleep beside her was one of the two non-humans of the group. His legs came to stick like stubs, with his forearms only having the addition of finger-like tarsals in the difference. Nestled into his rags and cradling an old hunting rifle, his wide and flat head rested against the sleeping bag's padded fabric. The bugman clicked his mandibles in preparation to speak.
Lucky for Razor, Hive have better stomachs.
No poisoning for Hive, he muttered proudly, rolling himself onto his shell. Laying across her camp bed, propping herself up on one elbow, Tora the Fearless puffed up her chest at the Hive's boasting. Self-consciously running her tongue along one of her tusks, she placed a scarred hand on the pommel of her large, rudimentary axe for comfort as she went to speak. I also have an impressive stomach. Lots of Battleborn drink wine made of grog pits, and we eat burrow steaks raw, she announced. Meeting that statement with an uproar of giggling was the last one in the circle. A woman with skin kissed by soul and eyes as blue as the frozen oceans. Blue Eyes adjusted her seating position to face Tora, an ever-present smirk on her face. With her hair in a messy bun atop her head and a baton at her lap, she debated whether or not to call Tora out on the obvious lie or to continue to annoy the beast. What do you even call a chunk of scarab meat anyway? Scarab fillet? Breast? Steak. She cocked her head to the side at the giant squatting man with a challenging eyebrow raised. Not everything is a steak. And shrieker meat ain't a steak neither, before you ask. The beast frowned and let go of the spit's crank, hefting his impractical weapon over his shoulder. Then what is it, smart guy? You're the gourmet here? Blue Eyes put on her best pout towards her grumpy companion. Remind me why we didn't turn you over to the crater carrions again. The beast huffed as he methodically carved off pieces of the giant beast's meat from the spit, offering them on the blade to each of his companions. Your avoidance of the question doesn't fill me with confidence, old friend. Confidence Man took the meat with his grubby little hands, nibbling with an assured smirk. I'm younger than you. And fine. I don't know, okay? The beast let out a humbled huff as he continued passing out the food. But I know it isn't steak. Now shut up and eat your stumper. Yes! The stronger the thing we eat, the stronger we get. That's just science, Tora announced, taking a large bite out of her dried meat. And I think we've just stumbled across the hidden mindset. Confidence Man chuckled with conviction. I wonder if they'd let us in past the blight if we ate enough wood. Let us in? You think a couple walking trees could hold me back? Drive us there next. I could clear the whole forest myself. Tora let out a loud and exaggerated laugh. The group shared a short chuckle, Blue Eyes quickly looking between the two grumps of the group to catch them smiling. West Engine kept her sword's pommel in front of her mouth in an attempt to hide her creeping smile. Meanwhile, the beast gave a simple roll of his eyes, but as he leaned forward to go for more meat, she saw his smile as it faded from his face.
Razor will never sleep while Tora speaks.
The hive grumbled as he sat up, accepting the last communal slices of meat. Are the bug's little ears too sensitive? Tora laughed a little too hard. Do hive even have ears, Razor? I don't see any on you. West Engine put down her sword, staring at her fellow survivor. I didn't see many hive back home. Never really had this close of a look. She leaned closer, reaching out an inquisitive finger to poke the side of Razor's head. Back home, where Razor gets attacked on sight? Razor cannot imagine why. The hive responded, swatting her hand away. Hive have ears. Razor has ears. You speak, and Razor speaks back. He continued, pointing to two small circular lumps that protruded from either side of his neck. Tora looked over at Razor, frowning as she was struck with a sudden pang of disproportionate guilt. Sorry for insulting your ears, dude. They're, not tiny. She turned her gaze away from the group, pulling from the light of the fire to hide the blood rushing to her cheeks. Razor was not offended? The hive cocked his head to the side, confused. Of course not. You're my friend, and I wouldn't choose companions who could be hurt so easily. Tora cleared her throat and nervously fretted with her fingers. Across the blaze, the beast shifted away from the campfire to settle back into his comfortable squat. He turned his head to Confidence Man, looking his friend in the eyes and seeing the same self-assured gaze he always knew. Of all the wastelanders with bounties we've handed in, you chose these 4 to spare. What was so special about them? Why were they worth more than what the clans offered us? The beast kept his voice low as Blue Eyes started another round of teasing towards West Engine. Because they're the best, Confidence Man beamed proudly, looking over his motley crew. Objectively untrue. We couldn't have found more of the best at a city. Ones without a price on their heads, the beast grumbled back. No. Listen, I'll tell you why I took them on. Confidence Man held up his hands with a confident grin. Without asking me, the grumpy gourmet interrupted. Without asking you, he continued, his smile only growing. They each gave me a reason. Every other target pulled a blade, or a gun, or dove into their truck and floored it, or what have you. But when I walked up to them, they gave me a reason to like them. To give a shit about what happens to them. Have you listened to them talk? Like it all? Tora's a mess. She's terrified of everything. Especially people. And Bug Boy? We stumbled into that colony half dead, and all he demanded was a promise. Just that alone made me curious enough to keep him around. And West? I can't take Coal Crown jobs anymore. Not after what she said to me. So sue me, beast. I have a heart. The beast watched his friend's smile fade from his face as he spoke, the bravado melting away as his eyes shifted to each person in turn. And Blue Eyes? I made him a deal. The woman in question interrupted. A sudden wave of silence washed over the group. The beast turned his attention to Blue Eyes, who was leaning back on her elbows and meeting his gaze with her own. The others had halted their own little conversations, watching the two clash with an air of tension clinging to them like a rot's ooze. The beast waited for her to speak, not wanting to give her any ammunition to deflect the question his eyes were asking. I had a job lined up in the creeping snow. Promised it would be worth not turning me into those fucks in the oil crater. Turned out to be a trap. Remember? She crossed her legs as she straightened them out. The battle wagon ambush, West Engine muttered under her breath. Exactly! Blue Eyes pointed a half-eaten piece of meat at her before taking another bite. That night, he asked me for another reason to keep me around. And I said I'd die out there all alone. And, as much as I hate to admit it, I wasn't lying. And that convinced you? The beast sent a suspicious glare towards Confidence Man. No, her sticking with us for weeks before did, he replied, as certain as always. I trust her completely. Same for the rest of you. We've been shot at, beat up, and bloodied way too much for me to not. I owe each of you my life just as much as you owe me yours. His words settled on the group like freshly falling snow, each of them visibly affected by the sudden expression of trust. The beast looked to the ground with a rare feeling of shame, eventually bringing himself to check on Blue Eyes with a quick glance. She had turned away from the group, bringing her knees to her chest and wrapping her arms around them. She looked out through the gaps in the boarded-up window at the clear violet night sky outside. The bright stars reflected in her oceanic eyes as she stared up at Nos and her children in their full glory. Thanks, boss, Blue Eyes said through her lap. Confidence Man replied with a small nod, sending another beaming smile across at his companions. In the distance, echoes of the wasteland carried themselves toward the group's shelter. Faint gunfire and the muted roaring of engines from the main road carried themselves into the city. The beast slowly rose to his full height, answering the silent question the entire group was getting ready to ask. They were getting involved. Razor sat up, pushing himself to his feet with 3 of his arms, while the 4th flicked across at the short man, launching something he had been entrusted with. Thin metal sung as it flew through the air, Confidence Man catching the airborne keys with a cocksure smirk. Tora got up and smothered the fire as the others quickly packed up their camp beds. The beast lugged the barricade of broken furniture they had used to bar the door out of the way. Porkchop, roused by the sudden movement, followed his masters, carrying the femur bone eagerly along. The survivors marched towards their vehicle as the road war drew closer, their trained ears identifying the different vehicles by their engines. 5 cliff bikes with low-caliber weapons, and a war rider that's engine seemed to be dying. Vultures pecking at the back of a dying bison. So, what do you call bear meat then? The driver's seat door was pulled open. Just another day.